Okay, so this is part 2, the election and beyond. We'll be taking a closer look at the candidates the next few months and how things may unfold from there, starting with election day as well as a peek into what the winter solstice and beyond looks like. Remember, we're still under the auspices of the fall equinox chart, so if you want to have a full and much deeper overview of this period of time that we're in, September 22nd to December 21st, you should watch part 1 of this video. We are at the doorstep of perhaps the biggest power transfer in the history of mankind. Power is being returned to we the people. And so I think you'll see this evidenced by not just a win for Trump, but a gargantuan landslide, and I'll show you why. Now, I've worked through both of these charts, so I'm not going to go through everything, but instead highlight certain visual planetary symmetries and pictures that are very important and that tell the story that I'm seeing on a bigger level. Now, both Trump and Biden's charts have strong Neptunian transits, progressions, directions. They've strong Neptunian elements going on in their charts right now, which calls into question how it's operating. You know, are they using it creatively or in a helping situation? Are they swimming towards higher connection with source? Or is it having a dissolving effect? Are we unclear? Are we unsure? Uncertain? Are we deceived, or are we the deceiver? Biden's chart is so obvious and easy to read. It's sort of incredible. There's so much Neptune, as well as deep changes with Pluto and Admetos. First, we have to notice this powerful transit of Neptune to his Imam Coli, or fourth house cusp. Neptune always dissolves structures and attachments which straitjacket our soul. So this is a particularly challenging transit, as it tells us that we need to turn our attention inward to our soul lives. This is not a good transit for someone who's entering a presidential race. It tells like there's a lot of confusion, uncertainty around career. And also we have to realize that the fourth house cusp are our emotional foundations. And as such, Neptune here presents problems and difficulties domestically and with family, and we know that there clearly are. So with this whole transit, lots of doubts, lots of uncertainties around direction, and this is what prompts the need for an inner reflection. And also here we have the Aries-Neptune directed midpoint structure on the meridian. And remember, the meridian represents the soul and the career from the standpoint of individuality. So with this structure, there's a ton of uncertainty, insecurity, instability, doubts out in the world. There's deception everywhere. I'm sure he's feeling so ungrounded. And now moving right along to the progressed and directed meridian. Again, the soul. We have another similar theme, Sun, Kronos, Neptune, on his progressed and directed meridian. So there are major vulnerabilities and weaknesses. Yes, it could be spiritual leadership, but that is not the trajectory of this chart. This configuration is much more about confused authority or deceptive. Could be deceptive leadership or dissolving or refused leadership. And I'm sure with all of this Neptune energy, that he is exhausted. A lot of physical weakness, sensitivities, vulnerabilities. And then we move on to the, we'll stay here. The progressed and directed meridian is also making a beeline toward natal Saturn, which is in opposition. So this is also telling us a lot of professional and domestic difficulties. This is a major check in his life direction. Still yet, on the meridian ascendant midpoint structure, which are professional situations and our connections with others, we have directed Pluto and Saturn and transiting Saturn here. Saturn and Pluto are both planets of change, but the Saturn tells us more of a structural change, that can be a stabilizing force, but also present as separations or departures from partnerships. So it's real reevaluation, reassessment, and the universe is going to bring you the circumstances that you need to change. And the Pluto would say a much deeper restructuring on a soul level. So definite changes in the profession, restructuring, transitions. The directed and progressed meridian ascendant midpoint here is also with Admetos. And the Admetos can be very solid, stable relations and professional circumstances. But again, I think what it's showing and taking everything into an account, I think it's presenting more as obstacles and endings relating to professional circumstance. And one more area with this natal Pluto and directed Kronos, which they're both in Leo, it's a conjunction. This would tell us of a change in government. And when you go down the rabbit hole of this structure here, what you find is a Capito Hades Kronos. So you begin to see the corruption within the family. Pluto is telling us that there are changes there. So you can really get a good feel for Biden's trajectory, and we're well within orb within a few months of those Pluto Admetos directions to his meridian ascendant midpoints coming to fruition, which are definitely saying endings and transitions. So moving to Trump's chart, and it's an entirely different feel. Over and over again, you see this growing attunement. There's a greater sensitivity and a strong emotional need to feel that one's work is important and to integrate these things into changing professional aspirations. Because moving forward, our tool bag is going to have to be very multidimensional. And so everyone's being prepared. And so with Neptune beginning this transit of his node, moon, and sun, we're growing more intuitive and sensitive. There's a greater attunement, and we are strongly influenced by our psychic sensitivity. We have a strong desire to pursue our ideals. And with Trump, you can see in his natal chart that there's a strong desire to help people. With this Venus Hades sun around his meridian, and it's also the root of his valuation issues, his feelings of being, not unloved, not loved enough, his lack of sense of self-worth. And so this is going to be an equally difficult transit as well, because the Neptune also strips us of old patterns of attachment. And that's why I think these valuation issues, which really reared their head around the second presidential debate, are up for inspection. We can see this here again in the transiting Saturn-Pluto opposition to his natal Venus, also Hades and Saturn in there, which is calling up the need for the inspection and reevaluation of all those feelings of being unloved and not appreciated, to deeper, as they are resolved, it allows us to have deeper spiritual connections that are transformative. So you can really see the process of individuation at work here. And there are several indications at this time that reveal this integration really coming into fruition in terms of his ability to sway the masses, the collective unconscious. Neptune Zeus Kronos is a really important structure in Trump's natal chart. Zeus Kronos is all about leadership. It's someone very autonomous who wants to be a leader, an authority figure. And with the Neptune, we get someone who's able to lead and create in the invisible realms. Someone who is visionary and intuitively creative. It can also tell us about unstable leadership or being defeated, but it can also be discontent and confusion in bringing out the right kind of expression. And there needs to be some soul searching to get to that point. And I'm sure Trump felt a bit of this in his life. And so if we look into the structure in his natal chart and with the meridian being the soul, so meridian Zeus Kronos, my leadership, it makes this 4-point picture with Mercury, Neptune, and is in alignment with Poseidon. So this is a leader who deals with unseen, non-physical forces, someone who really understands abstractions, who has an interest in the abstract concepts and is an advocate for truth and bringing about of clarity, clarification. And so this early on was one of the structures that always stopped me in my tracks when working on this chart. And by the way, if I'm talking a lot about Trump's chart, it's because I have really worked with this chart for many years now. And with Biden's chart, I haven't. I don't even have a perfect sense if his 10 a.m. birth time is right on the nose. But with Trump's chart, I'm very comfortable with the time I'm using. But with this structure early on, it always stopped me in my tracks because of that Poseidon being front and center in the configuration. Poseidon by and large is a very positive influence because it's all about truth, clarity, insight. As a matter of fact, Poseidon is basically planted on the world axis for the next 3 years. So we will all be feeling this and we'll all be gaining a ton of truth and clarity because God knows we need it. So this Neptune, Zeus, Kronos direction coming to fruition on Trump's meridian, and this is happening right now. So this is a very active. And when you get directions to very personal points, they absolutely create events. That's what's so amazing about the Uranian system, is that it's so precise in that way. But this structure tells us about unseen humanitarian leadership, the ability to create something out of nothing using vision, intuition, imagination. It can tell us also about dissolved or lost battles with the Neptune. It is the configuration for losing the war. But again, that's not in line with what the rest of Trump's chart is telling us. Vita calls Zeus Kronos Neptune combination a big gas explosion. But I think you can see the whole gas explosion thing. It can be reinterpreted as the ability to work with the unseen energy of the collective unconscious. And I think that this will be a big, big signal when you see proof of that when people have voted and the election is done. Also coming up for him, November 30th, is this lunar eclipse at 8:38 of Gemini, and it is exactly on his sun meridian midpoint. Wow, exactly to the second. So the sun meridian is one of the most important midpoint structures for career because it's relationship between your ego and your soul. And if you'll notice, there's also Saturn there. So this tells us there's a slow but solid development of career, that he could in his life have felt a lack of contentment or a feeling that there's more, and that's what really keeps you driving and persistent. And so with this lunar eclipse exactly on this structure, there are strong emotional needs to feel that one's work is meaningful and to develop that, something that's emotionally satisfying. It's a real realizing and sensing of life purpose. And there's also a solar eclipse, December 14th, 23 degrees Sagittarius on his moon, sun, and node. So I think this is going to be a turning point. He is turning towards his emotional and instinctive drives more and more, and he's being pointed out his egoic issues, which will help transform the valuation issues. But what really is so amazing are these planetary symmetrical pictures around his progressed meridian right now. And his progressed Saturn is there too. And remember, the meridian is the soul, and it's also the career from the standpoint of individuality. It's not necessarily the work that you do. And so with the Saturn here, he's gaining experience, he's serious, he's focused, he can expect some delays and difficulties as well. This is going to be here for a few months, this tight meridian Saturn progression. But I think it also represents a definitive separation from the past, both individually and collectively. The Vulcanus Apollon here on his meridian is very influential, major expansions, major successes. And with the Saturn, it can be very solid, stable, enduring changes, but difficult ones. With the Neptune, he's working non-solidly, privately, with his intuition. Could the Neptune mean a dissolution of the expansion? Absolutely, but that is not the trajectory of this chart. If there was any time to be working non-solidly, energetically with the collective unconscious, it is now. And, it's saying he'll have great success there. And with the Hades as well, he can be hindered extensively by the dark energies, the corruption. But the Hades is also telling us about people in need, and that's about the entire population of the world right now. So you can see here he's motivated to deal with the deprivation and help people. And then we have this other really powerful structure, which is the Jupiter, Zeus, Pluto with the Poseidon that's in a 3-point picture with Capito. This planetary picture here is really important, as you'll see in a few minutes, because it is a structure on the world axis indicating this great ideological shift, this beginning. With Zeus, we always have beginnings, and Jupiter, they're positive growth and development. So we have these beginnings of these ideological shifts, joint intellectual and spiritual development. These are shared ideas, shared cultural objectives, and Trump is totally tapped into this. It's really amazing structure. Also, with the Vulcanus Apollon, with the Neptune Hades, really amazing. All right, now we're going to come back to the world axis and take a look at what things look like on the other side of this election and moving forward through December. But this first structure, Node Neptune Hades, is also a planetary picture that I feel is revealing in a sense of this a potential landslide situation, because what it's telling us about is that while there are a lot of people who see this exodus toward Trump, this structure also tells us about a lot of people who are very disappointed as well. It's a serious condition of not seeing clearly, where there's a lack of judgment in associations, there are disappointments, deceptions, the associations are somehow nefarious with the Hades. And I think that Trump's win could potentially be so big, with blue states going red, that it's really going to shine the light on the vastness of the fake reality narrative being run by the MSN, by the mainstream media, the politicians, the polls, the experts, the corporations. And while there are a lot of people who aren't buying it, there are a lot who are, and who have been running with this different narrative of mask them up, lock them down, Biden's ahead in the polls type of narrative. And so you get these really big anomalies between the way things appear and the way things actually are. And this structure is also telling people that they can heal their confusion by tuning into their intuition and relying on their own critical thinking to see what truth is. So these anomalies are only going to get bigger as we move through November and December, because starting at election time and into mid-November, we have this Jupiter, Zeus, Pluto on the world axis with Capito, Poseidon. The same structure I mentioned earlier in Trump's chart around his progressed meridian is here on the world axis, and the Jupiter, Zeus, Pluto indicates a lot of positive growth, expansion, and with the Capito, Poseidon, that this is the beginning of a huge ideological shift. There's a development of shared ideals, shared cultural objectives, shared intellectual and spiritual development. This election is going to resonate around the world. The Jupiter, Zeus, Pluto is also a great financial midpoint structure. And so I do believe, as the president has recently said, there will most definitely be stimulus checks. And I think you'll see the markets respond as well. Now, Jupiter, Pluto, Zeus can also exacerbate, and it is the formula for fire, spreading a fire. And so you could definitely see this. But honestly, I think with the Capito, Poseidon, what is more likely is that we're heading into an ideological war. And the election, and with the election, these new ideals and shared worldviews among many people are going to come to the forefront, and it's going to shine an even brighter light on the disparity and the contrast between the views of the people and the ideology of the old system, the old service to self system. So if anything, we are headed during this quarter is into, until the winter solstice, is into an ideological war. And I think we'll see this all over the world, this struggle to control the consciousness of the people by controlling the Kung Flu narrative versus, Trump beginning to push to open the country, which is going to set off its own power struggle, for the consciousness of the people. And I think this is going to call out even more the absurd attempts of the dark factions still running all of these deceptive programs, and they're going to begin to be outed. That means mainstream media, the politicians, the governments, the corporations. It's all coming out on so many different levels. Because as November gets rolling and we have this great expansion going on, what comes into view mid-November through mid-December are these structures of Kronos, Hades, Neptune, and Saturn and Mitos. Now, actually, the Kronos, Hades, Neptune, I believe, goes through the winter solstice. So it's around for a while. But what it tells us about are corrupt officials, corrupt government. And with Neptune, it can indicate fraud. So you're going to see all of this corruption and deceit, both being played as well as being exposed. I mean, this is the battle. The dark faction is going to try everything to hang on to this Kung Flu narrative because that is their last means of controlling the world population. But it's not going to work, as we know. And it's a losing battle because remember, Pluto is on. It's right on that world axis right now, and it's right on the world axis in the eclipse. In the fall equinox chart. And so Pluto is exhuming it all for the world to see, and in seeing it, we can finally release it. And I think what you could also potentially see for everyone who has been waiting for these indictments and arrests to happen, because Kronos, Hades, Neptune is we're dealing with obsolete governments. It's a fallout of all of this criminal activity. So you could see everyone's been waiting for that. So we could see a lot of that starting to take place. Also joining mid-November to mid-December is the Saturn and Mitos midpoint structure on the Aries point, and it's a conjunction, so it's strong. So the Saturn and Mitos can indicate a lot of obstructions and obstacles. This is it's almost like a bottleneck. It's a really difficult pass. A lot of overwhelming circumstances in the world because you're watching these two ideologies battle it out. One is to evolve into our human potential, our soul sovereignty, and one is to remain attached and dependent on the old system, the government, the mainstream media, the technology, artificial intelligence. So on one level, there's a lot of resistance to the suppression from those who want to move ahead, but there can also be a lot of resistance to the truth, because when all of this is coming out, if you are not awake, it opens up a Pandora's box when you start to see the vastness of the deception. And so I think, in a sense, the Saturn in Mitos is telling us about this difficult past, and that there's this end of this battle to actively suppress, and people are seeing it. People are finding out, because once we get to the winter solstice and with the Mercury Poseidon on the world axis, this is a configuration for the beginning of truth and clarity and insights. The Neptune Kronos Hades is actually still there. I think I mentioned earlier that it was only until mid-December, but that structure is there well into for a while. And what I think that's going to be is an unveiling of all the corruption. And also we've got Node Hades there as well. So, we're going to continue to see this fallout. But the world charts are also saying we're finding truth and clarity in it. And as a matter of fact, as we get into January, February, Zeus and Poseidon will be making its first contact with the world axis in early February, and actually end of January, early February, and there'll be this back and forth of both planets contacting the axis over the next 3 years. So with Zeus, Poseidon, Aries, it's telling us that we're now getting the evidence, the truth, the proof of all of this corruption, and the public is seeing it. It's no longer hidden. And so there you have it, the equinox, the election, the candidates, a look ahead. I think we're heading into some amazing times of truth and clarity and growth and development. And this was a difficult year, but we are rounding the corner. And so I will see you guys at the solstice or thereafter, because my videos are never really on time, and but they come out when they come out, right? And I wish you all well and blessings.